Revenge with Karen.
I thought you said we had a failover mirror in Frankfurt, the junior engineer whispered. Brandon blinked, then muttered, "We do." "No, sir," the engineer said, tapping the blinking dashboard. "We did, but it's unreachable." The last successful sync was 8 days ago, right before Jessica left. 3 days earlier, none of this had imploded yet. The lights still worked. The clients were still online. And Jessica Carter, hoodie, black coffee, hair in a bun like it had been since Obama's first term, was sitting alone in the server room at 11:12 p.m., watching the final backup complete on a system that never once failed on her watch. 10 years of disaster-free uptime, of patched holes no one saw, of sleeping under her desk during the 2017 bandwidth bug and waking up to a Slack message that just said THX. She didn't work for praise. She worked because someone had to make sure nothing broke when the VPs started making vision boards. Her job wasn't glamorous. She didn't schmooze at cloud expos or keynote anything. She built the silent bones of a beast that ran across 17 countries, and nobody noticed because it never screamed. It just worked, until Brandon walked back in. Brandon, the founder's son, returned from his startup sabbatical in Bali or Brooklyn, or whatever place sold him the right hashtags. He wore hoodies too, $900 ones, and threw around phrases like agile mindfulness and disruptive resilience, while sipping oat milk lattes he ordered with a QR code tattoo on his wrist. He called a team-wide all-hands the day after his arrival. Made everyone pile into the open plan bullpen like it was a TED talk. "We're modernizing," said, and streamlining legacy ops. Then he turned, eyes laser-locked on Jessica. Some roles, while appreciated, just aren't aligned with where we're headed. She didn't flinch, just took a sip of her gas station coffee and blinked once slow. "I assume you've documented the backup architecture," he added, trying to sound like he understood what she did. Jessica nodded. "Check the logs. Everything's there. Just make sure Troy transfers root access correctly." Brandon grinned. Troy's a fast learner. Jessica didn't smile back, so's fire. "Pause here for just a second. If you've made it this far into this mess of outages, ego, and system sabotage, do me a favor. Smash that like button and hit subscribe. I know everyone says that, but seriously, 95% of folks listening don't sub, and it keeps the team motivated while we untangle all this digital drama. All right, back to the story. So who's Troy? Picture a tech speaker who got lost on the way to his own talk and just decided to freestyle. Troy's LinkedIn headline said tech philosopher, cloud evangelist, lover of disruption. His last tweet was encryption is the new empathy light bulb. He spelled encryption wrong. He also happened to be Brandon's podcast co-host. And now, through some horrifying marriage of nepotism and influencer culture, Jessica's replacement. They gave her 1 week to train him, 1 week to pass on a decade's worth of duct tape, failover switches, and scripts she coded during panic attacks. 1 week to distill a system she understood like muscle memory into bullet points for a man who thought Raid was a gaming clan. Jessica didn't fight it, didn't rant. She just gave him the documents, the readmes, the logs. The code comments that said, "Don't touch this unless you like fire." She wrote a sticky note on the whiteboard before she left that said, "If the lights go out, it's not my flashlight you're missing, it's the map you shredded." And then she walked out. No drama, no exit interview. Just a calm nod to the receptionist, a badge placed neatly in the tray, and a final glance at the overhead monitor that still read, "System stable." They didn't know it yet, but what Jessica took with her wasn't revenge. It was gravity, a quiet pull that kept their whole sky from falling. And when she let go, well, you'll see. Troy showed up on day one in a bomber jacket that looked like it was stolen from a DJ booth in Ibiza and said, "Okay, let's optimize some data waterfalls, yeah." Jessica didn't blink. She just handed him a 4-inch thick binder labeled DR Protocols Master. He didn't open it. He took a selfie with it. Brandon hovered like an eager dad at a little league game, nodding proudly. Troy's got this natural instinct for systems thinking. He beamed, like the man hadn't just asked earlier if redundant nodes were, quote, like backup vibes. Jessica didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just opened the terminal, ran a last snapshot, and slid over the terminal logs like they were a last will and testament. "Everything's in the documentation," she said, dry as drywall. "The logs are your Bible now." Troy winked. "I like to learn by doing, and I suggest you start praying," Jessica muttered. Over the next few days, the knowledge transfer played out like a poorly written sitcom. Troy trying to rename backup clusters mid-process, Jessica quietly closing the terminal behind him before he borked the entire failover chain. Troy asking if the cron jobs were nerd alarms, Jessica nodding and walking away. Every time he said, "I got this," Jessica wrote a new note in the binder that started with "Do not let him near the mirror sinks again." He wanted to overhaul the logging system, replace it with something more intuitive called Moonbeam. Jessica asked if Moonbeam supported encrypted audit trails. He said, "What's that?" Brandon clapped him on the back and said, "Don't worry. Jessica's just old school." So Jessica left the little time bomb Troy built when he changed the incremental sync script to run at 2 a.m. UTC without verifying node latency. Left the reconfiguration he did on the Frankfurt Vault endpoint that introduced a 7% packet loss risk. Left the broken webhook from the Sydney cluster that was silently failing to report errors. Left all of it, because that was the real trick. Jessica didn't sabotage anything, just didn't catch the mistakes. See, when you're the backbone of a system, people forget it's your hands catching every falling brick. They think the wall just stands. So the moment you stop holding it up well, suddenly gravity feels a lot more personal. By Thursday, Legal sent a form email asking if she'd completed the offboarding checklist. She replied with a single screenshot. Every box ticked, every credential turned over, every protocol documented. Was all there, just not interpreted, not translated, not idiot-proofed, because she was done saving people from themselves. Friday morning, Troy deleted a root shell script thinking it was a deprecated config, and 3 test clusters went offline for 9 minutes. He blamed the interns. Brandon agreed. Jessica, sipping a hot coffee on her porch while watching her dog roll in the grass, got a text from the only senior engineer left who still had sense. "They're already breaking things. Not your fault. Just wanted you to know." She didn't reply, just smiled. There's something delicious about absence, when people mistake your silence for weakness, until they realize the only thing between them and the void was you. And now, she was gone. The podcast bros were officially in charge, and the cracks had already started to show. Jessica's last shift started like any other. 6 a.m. Lights flickering overhead, lukewarm vending machine coffee in a chipped mug that said "Control Z my will to live." She sat down at her console, cracked her knuckles like a pianist before a recital, and opened the terminal. No music, no speeches. Just the quiet rhythm of a woman locking a system down like a mother prepping a bunker before the tornado hits. She ran a full backup sweep, not the basic scheduled kind that Troy was now convinced could run on autopilot like some Roomba for servers. No, this was the deep clean, the real backup. The one that flushed system memory, mirrored the critical data lakes, re-indexed the archive tables, validated every node against the internal checksum registry, and encrypted it all under a vault system she had written in the middle of panic attack during the 2019 vendor migration debacle. She created a cold archive too, deep storage, manual trigger only. The kind of thing no one noticed until the worst-case scenario unfolded. She even ran a phantom deployment to test it. Perfect. Still worked like a charm. Then she created a new README in the root directory. No fanfare. Just 10 lines of plain text, no emoji, no exclamation marks. If you're reading this, you skipped the checklist. Good luck. A list of the modules they'd likely break. And 3 warnings: do not trigger failover without validating the sync loop integrity. Do not alter the vault endpoint without regenerating auth keys. Do not delete the script labeled Legacy Heartbeat. It is not deprecated. Jessica didn't leave that note out of spite. She left it because she knew what was coming, knew how it would unfold, not if but when. She couldn't stop them from being reckless, but she could, at least warn them, sort of like yelling iceberg at a yacht full of guys doing shots. At 4:22 p.m., she wiped her last dev container, disabled her personal access keys, and logged out of her admin shell for the final time. She walked to HR with the calm of someone who already knew the fire was coming, but had already handed over the extinguisher. The handoff was swift. Brandon showed up to shake her hand. White button up, sleeves rolled, smug grin like a discount Tony Robbins. "Well, Jessica," he said, flashing that podcast host smile, "thanks for everything. We're in a good place now." Jessica looked him in the eye just once and said, "I hope so." He smirked like he'd won something. "You'll see, we've got a whole new direction coming. Troy's got some great ideas about simplifying the architecture." Jessica nodded slowly. Simplifying fire alarms doesn't make the building safer, just quieter. He placed her badge in the tray. No dramatic speeches. Just a quiet take care to the receptionist. As she walked out the building, no one clapped. No one gave her a balloon or a cake or even a lukewarm goodbye. But on her way out, she passed one of the few engineers who actually read things. He handed her a folded sticky note and whispered, "I backed up your scripts on a private repo, just in case." She smiled and patted his shoulder. "You'll survive." Probably. He stepped outside. The sky was the kind of gray that didn't rain, just loomed. She zipped up her hoodie, looked once at the glass monolith behind her where Brandon and Troy were probably congratulating each other for migrating the old guard out. Inside, the system hummed, for now. But the heartbeat script she built, the one that quietly pinged the health of the backup relay every 6 hours, had already stopped responding. They hadn't noticed. Not yet. By Monday, Troy was already on Slack posting a 10-thread sermon about refactoring cloud continuity for 2025 scalability. He attached a selfie next to a wall of monitors, none of which were showing anything useful, and captioned it, "Modern resilience isn't about redundancy. It's about intentional risk." Jessica would have choked on her coffee. The post got 3 fire emojis and won 100 from Brandon. Meanwhile, in Singapore, client's read replica server was quietly screaming into the void. At first, no one noticed. Troy had silenced most non-critical alerts, thinking the red flashing things were distracting. He'd also deprecated the incremental sync checker Jessica had built because he didn't like how cluttered the logs looked. So when the replication drift hit 4.7% on the Frankfurt node, no one knew. Not the interns, not the product managers. Not Brandon, was too busy prepping a speech on operational pivoting for the next stakeholder town hall. But legal knew something was off. Not from an alert, but from a phone call at 2:17 p.m. from the CTO of a high-value European client. Her tone was dry and cold. "Can someone explain why our rollback pipeline is capped at 5% throughput during a Tier 1 restore attempt?" Legal forwarded the email to Brandon, who replied with 3 words, "It's just lag." Jessica had written protocols specifically to avoid that phrase. Lag wasn't lag. Lag was the system whispering we're bleeding under the floorboards. And this wasn't lag, this was desync. Silent, widening desync. Internally, a few engineers started whispering about weird log gaps. Minor stuff at first, missing confirmations, unexplained retries. One guy even reported that the Sydney node failed a backup mirror test, but passed on retry. Troy dismissed it as a hiccup. Meanwhile, Troy posted another Slack update. "Our new Moonbeam-based sync framework is live. Real-time syncing in a distributed first mindset." #nextgen #intentional chaos. Jessica would have thrown something at the screen. Moonbeam didn't even have rollback capability without a $9,000 license key. And the version Troy installed. Trial expired 2 weeks ago. But Jessica was gone. Somewhere in Vermont, she was chopping wood at her brother's cabin, watching her dog chase leaves, phone on silent. She hadn't checked her email in 3 days. She didn't need to, because she knew this part. This was the "everything looks fine if you don't look too closely" stage. Where the graphs still tick up, the dashboards stay green because someone turned off the alerts. The leadership keeps smiling because nobody's screamed yet. Inside the company, that smile was starting to strain. The internal IT team ran a shadow audit and flagged something odd. The disaster recovery handoff checklist Brandon signed off on had an entire section left incomplete: vault access rotation. No new keys, no new ownership tokens, just a vague note from Brandon, handled by Troy. Compliance pinged him, twice. No response. Instead, Brandon called a stand-up and said, "We're ahead of schedule. The modernization is working. This is what transformation looks like, people." They clapped. No one asked why the Frankfurt node was in safe mode. No one saw that the dashboard Jessica built, an internal-only script that monitored real-time sync health, hadn't updated in 4 days. It was still running, but the service Troy used to read it had been disabled. "Too many pop-ups," he said. The cracks weren't screaming yet. We're whispering, in packet loss, in silent rollback errors, in client restore times stuck at 5%, and Brandon's voice saying, "Just lag." But Jessica was already a ghost in their machine, one they hadn't even begun to miss properly. Yet, it started with a red flag buried in a forgotten corner of Slack, an ops channel named #infrastructure legacy that only 2 engineers still had pinned. At 2:41 a.m., system-generated alert posted, "Sync loop failure, Site 3 unreachable. Attempted retries, 5. Escalation protocol. Null, no one responded. Troy had muted the channel a week ago, called it legacy noise, said they needed to focus forward. Brandon agreed, deleted it from his sidebar. But back in the server pit, where air conditioning still hummed over outdated desks, Rhea from internal IT noticed something else while prepping for a quarterly audit. The new deployment stack was missing 2 of the critical vault authentication tokens. Specifically, the rotation keys for the cold storage backup vaults. She double-checked the logs. The offboarding entry for Jessica was complete on paper, but the line for vault credential handoff was signed by Brandon himself, not validated by the system. No actual key rotation occurred. Rhea did what Maria always did, escalated through proper channels, emailed compliance, CC'd the infrastructure lead, attached screenshots. Compliance sent a polite but pointed follow-up to Brandon. Subject, outstanding item, vault credential handoff, Jessica Carter, hi Brandon. Just confirming whether vault credentials were rotated during Jessica's offboarding per SOP 4.2. Logs indicate no new tokens were generated. Please confirm by EOD. Brandon didn't answer. He saw it, marked it as read, then archived it. Because at that moment, he was busy prepping for the monthly VC check-in. The kind where board members pretend to understand cloud infrastructure as long as the graphs are green and the numbers point up. He logged into Zoom with the fake skyline background, Troy sitting beside him in a new hoodie that said data is sexy. Brandon smiled like a man who thought bulletproof vests made him invincible. Migration's complete, he said. Seamless. Zero downtime. Our new architecture is more agile, leaner, and built for resilience. The investors nodded, smiled, took notes. One asked about costs. Brandon mentioned they'd saved $230K in legacy salary overhead. No one said Jessica's name. And somewhere, behind that digital smokescreen, warning was still flashing in a channel no one watched. Another red flag, another missed heartbeat. By late afternoon, Site 3, Frankfurt, was no longer reporting metrics. Maria flagged it, again. This time, she bypassed Brandon and sent it straight to legal with the subject line. Urgent. Frankfurt sync failure / unreachable node no response. Brandon was too busy uploading a new podcast episode, rethinking redundancy. Less is more with a thumbnail of him and Troy high-fiving. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the system Jessica built, something had shifted. The loop she designed, an intricate pattern of dependency checks, sync echoes, and failover handshakes, was unraveling. Every loop required a key, a timing sequence, a signature. Without those, the system didn't scream, it withdrew, quietly, methodically. That's what scared Maria the most, not the errors, but the silence. 'Cause Jessica hadn't left behind chaos. She'd left absence. And the deeper they went, the more they realized there was no backup for Jessica Carter. There never had been. Only the illusion that someone else could carry the weight. And the illusion, it was beginning to crack. The email arrived at 6:03 p.m. on a Wednesday, buried between an Amazon shipping confirmation and a YouTube notification for a woodworking video Jessica never remembered subscribing to. The sender, legal at CloudSynapse.com. Subject, quick confirmation vault transition protocol, no greeting, no signature. Just one line, just confirming you decommissioned all access at offboarding, correct? No details, no context. Just that tight, nervous legal speak that stinks of someone trying to cover their ass before the smell hits the boardroom. Jessica stared at it while sipping tea on her porch, her dog curled up at her feet, a soft dusk settling over the trees. She hadn't thought about vaults or keys or failover chains in days, and she liked it that way. She thought about ignoring it, but the old habits die hard. She opened a new email, no emojis, no exclamation marks, just the facts, just like they taught her in Incident Response 101. Per checklist, all access removed on exit. Vault credentials handed over to operations lead. All system logs available in shared archive per SOP 3.8. Last full backup completed day of departure. Documentation uploaded and reviewed per request. Then she added a single closing sentence. A scalpel. I cannot help with what I'm no longer responsible for. She hit send. Didn't wait for a reply. Back in the office, that sentence landed like a punch in a boardroom. Not dramatic, just final. There was no hand to hold anymore, no backup wizard to call at 3 a.m. No calm voice on the other end of the line that would quietly log in, patch the hole, and make the flames disappear before the interns even knew something caught fire. Now, when the alarms blinked red, they stayed red. When the dashboards froze, they stayed frozen. When Site 3 failed to sync for the fifth straight day, no one quite knew how to make it stop. Troy, sweating through his fourth hoodie of the week, tried rebooting the node, reconfiguring the endpoint, then blaming DNS. Nothing worked, because Jessica hadn't just set up the vault authentication, she'd woven it into the heartbeat of the system. And now that heartbeat was gone. Maria from internal IT forwarded Jessica's reply to compliance, then stared at her screen. She didn't say anything for a long time. The office was quieter than usual. The slap of panic hadn't arrived yet, but the dread was setting in, heavy and slow, like fog creeping under a door. In the boardroom, Brandon was pacing. Legal had started asking more pointed questions. Site 3 was still down. A major client in Germany was threatening to pull a contract. He kept repeating, "This is just temporary," like a prayer. Troy tried to recover the backup trail, but didn't realize he deleted the only working mirror, trying to make space for his optimization layer. No one could find the cold archive. No one could decrypt the backup vault because the rotation key, Jessica's final handoff, was still unsigned. The system was still running, but it wasn't alive. It was a haunted machine now, operating on old memory, echoes of structure. And Jessica was gone, not vindictive, not gloating, just done. She didn't burn it down. She just let go. And the absence she left behind wasn't noise, it was proof. Proof of what happens when you mistake silence for simplicity. You replace substance with vibes. When you think the spine of a system is just another line item to streamline. For the first time in a decade, no one knew who to call. And the weight of that, it was starting to crush. At 9:12 a.m., Friday morning, the call came in from a top-tier financial client in Zurich. The kind of client whose logo appeared in pitch decks, investor updates, and on the lobby wall in brushed steel. Lead engineer didn't mince words. "We just lost 6 hours of transactional data during peak operations. Your system rolled back to an outdated cache. What the hell is happening?" The words hit like a blunt instrument. Brandon, still in the middle of an alignment huddle, waved the caller to hold. His face went pale. "Call Troy," he muttered. Troy, who'd overslept again, rolled into the office wearing mismatched sneakers and a hoodie that said future-proof or die, was holding a smoothie. Brandon dragged him into the glass-walled war room and hissed, Zurich screaming, "They lost data. Rollback failed. Where's the mirror?" Troy blinked. "It should have auto-activated. That's what the Moonbeam docs said, fallbacks baked in." Brandon slammed his palm on the table. "It didn't. There's no mirror. There's no sync. Zurich is threatening breach litigation." "Where is the backup, Troy?" Troy opened his laptop, hands shaking, tapped into the Moonbeam dashboard. Blank. Sync path Jessica built was still there, but the vault was dark. The authentication token expired. The mirror node, offline for 4 days, unchecked, unlogged, forgotten. His voice cracked. I thought it was all automated." Brandon leaned in, eyes bloodshot. It wasn't. Silence. Just the hum of a $4,000 ergonomic fan in the corner. Across the floor, phones started lighting up. Client success scrambled. The Slack channels turned into live autopsies. Engineers threw around words like catastrophic, irreversible, escalate to legal. One intern fainted. The Zurich rollback error wasn't just a glitch. It exposed that none of the backup paths had been tested since Jessica left. The fallback activation required a manual trigger, a timed, signed sequence verified through 2-stage credentials Jessica never fully explained. Because she was supposed to train Troy on it. He'd waved it off. "Too clunky," he'd said. "Streamline it later." Later never came. In Zurich, transactions stalled. User access was locked. Millions in client-side activity vanished into a black hole of partial state. And the worst part, the fallback trigger still existed. The vault still could be restored. But the activation chain had been severed. And the chain, it wasn't digital. It was Jessica, her knowledge, her presence, and she was gone. Troy tried to ping her on Slack. Got the gray not found bubble. Emailed her? No reply. He looked up at Brandon. I think we need her." Brandon's jaw tensed. "We replaced her." Troy whispered, "We didn't." The war room spiraled. Phones screamed. Lawyers hovered. Investors called. Screens blinked red. Somewhere a fire alarm went off, not metaphorical. And through all of it, Jessica sat at a roadside diner 3 states away, sipping burnt coffee and flipping through a dog-eared paperback about wilderness survival. Her phone was off. Her inbox quiet. The waitress asked, "Refill?" Jessica nodded, "Sure." Back in the office, Troy stared into his monitor like it owed him mercy. The vault access screen was frozen, blinking, authentication chain incomplete. He whispered to himself, how do you complete a chain that only lived in her head? No one answered, because the silence Jessica left behind wasn't empty. It was precise. And now it was winning. By noon, Zurich client had escalated to full-blown legal threat. Their lawyers demanded a forensic timeline of the incident, restoration assurances, and a named contact at Cloud Synapse who would be held personally accountable if financial damage was confirmed. That's when the founder, yes, the founder, was looped in. Leonard Roth didn't do day-to-day anymore, handed off control to Brandon 18 months ago under the impression that his son would inject new energy into the company's culture. But Leonard still kept a quiet eye on the place. He knew when to stay out of the way, and when to step in like a wrecking ball. His message was short: pull the logs, set a meeting, now. Brandon tried to head it off. Dad, listen, this was a legacy flaw. The old system, Jessica's system, just wasn't built for scale. We've been upgrading. Her architecture had blind spots. This isn't on us. Leonard didn't even look at him, just turned to legal. Logs. The head of legal, who hadn't slept in 2 days, opened the system archive with trembling fingers. And there it was. The paper trail, the audit breadcrumbs, everything. Jessica's departure was clean, cold, airtight. Final backup done. Credential turnover logged. Vault keys transferred pending rotation. Handoff checklist signed by Jessica, countersigned by Brandon. Follow-up compliance note unanswered. Then, buried deep in the admin Slack channel, timestamped 11:03 p.m. on her final day, Jessica's last message: do not proceed without validating chain integrity. No one had replied, not even a thumbs up. Leonard read that line twice. His voice was quiet when it came. Did you? Brandon blinked. What? Validate the chain. Silence. Troy, suddenly very interested in his shoelaces, muttered, didn't think it was necessary. Moonbeam's auto-redundancy, Leonard snapped his head around. You replaced the core failover protocol with a third-party app that has no native rollback. Brandon tried to smile. It's scalable. It's the future. Is it stable? Leonard's voice cracked like ice. Because right now we're hemorrhaging millions in transactional data loss, and the system your team built can't even tell us what it's missing. Jessica's setup never failed, not once. And now, Zurich's threatening litigation, our backups locked behind an incomplete chain, and your entire strategy was based on vibes and branding. Brandon stammered, it's fixable. Leonard stood up, didn't yell, didn't curse. He just said it like a eulogy. You removed the spine. The room went dead. Legal cleared her throat, soft and hollow. Audit confirms it. The failure stems from incomplete continuity procedures during offboarding. Specifically, failure to rotate vault credentials and map the trigger protocol. All signs point to administrative omission, not technical defect. Leonard nodded once. That's what I thought. Brandon opened his mouth, closed it. Leonard turned to Troy. Get out of this room. Troy hesitated. I can help, I said. Get out. Troy left. Leonard walked to the conference screen and stared at the red blinking monitor. The system was operational, technically, but it wasn't working. Not safely, not as designed. It was on fire, invisibly. Then he asked the question no one wanted to hear. Have you reached out to her? Brandon's eyes narrowed. You can't be serious. Leonard looked at him like he was something stuck to his shoe. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. You broke the system, son. Now you fix it. Brandon didn't move. Leonard turned back to the screen, staring into the flickering logs. Whispered, you replaced an engineer with a marketer. Brandon looked like he might speak. I'd argue, but there was nothing left to spin. The logs told the story. Jessica had left them every tool they needed. They just never picked them up. And now, they were bleeding out on a battlefield they couldn't even name. All because they mistook silence for simplicity and forgot who held the spine. Monday, 8:45 a.m. The dashboard went blood red. Across 17 countries, clients were logging in and finding nothing. Error 504s, broken portals, missing dashboards, delayed transactions. The Zurich incident had been the appetizer. This was the meal. Every node on the failover network was blinking red or unresponsive. The cold archive hadn't activated. The fallback mirrors sat idle. All global access had flatlined. In the command center, Brandon burst through the doors, tie half-knotted, sweat staining his collar. Where is the trigger? He barked. Run the backup failover now. The room fell still. A junior engineer, Tim, who'd only been hired 6 weeks ago, swallowed hard and said, it's under her profile. Brandon blinked. What? The root trigger, Tim clarified. The failover chain activation. It was coded into Jessica's vault protocol. Requires access through her credential lineage. We tried everything, can't override it without corrupting the backup. He paused. We can't get in. Brandon stared at the screen. Site 3, dead. Site 7, unreachable. API calls to the cold archive, returning null packets. Billing data fragmented. User data missing timestamps. Real-time telemetry frozen at 8:43 a.m. Legal sent a Slack message. Zurich has initiated breach protocol. Brandon pulled out his phone and dialed. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Nothing. Across the street, in a booth at a coffee shop with an open view of the Cloud Synapse building, Jessica stirred a packet of raw sugar into her mug and watched the swarm of suits race past the windows. The junior engineer from last week, Maria's intern, looked like he was about to cry. Jessica's phone buzzed once. She read the caller ID, didn't answer. Instead, she composed one message. Calm, measured. 2. Legal at Cloud Synapse.com subject. Vault inquiry. Everything I built was within policy. All credentials transferred. Documentation archived. Trigger paths protected per SOP. If you require assistance, please send a formal request in writing. My consultancy rates apply. Then, just before pressing send, she added one more line. This will be my last communication until scope is confirmed. She hit send, then turned off the phone. Back in the boardroom, Brandon was pacing like a man looking for an exit in a windowless room. The CTO was silent. The head of legal was compiling the audit timeline. Leonard stood in the corner, arms crossed. You mean to tell me, Leonard said slowly, that you allowed a global system to run without verifying the only person who knew how to restore it had been properly offboarded? Brandon opened his mouth. Leonard raised a hand. Don't speak unless it starts with I was wrong. Brandon sat down, hard. The room didn't breathe. Across the table, a board member asked, is it recoverable? Another engineer stepped in. Yes, with time. We'll need to rebuild the vault chain manually, verify each mirror. It's weeks of work. Maybe more, and we'll still need her to validate certain keys. She wrote part of it in custom syntax. Brandon's voice cracked. She won't answer. Someone else asked, can we sue her? Legal replied instantly. No, she followed every protocol. Her exit was flawless. It's all in writing. We were just sloppy. Not sloppy, Leonard said. Stupid. He turned to Brandon. Tried to look clever, and you lost the system. The final dashboard metric hit 0. Global uptime, 0.00%. Across the street, Jessica closed her laptop, dropped a 20 on the table, and stepped out into the cold morning air. Her phone stayed off. In her bag were 3 job offers from competitors who'd heard whispers about what had happened. All came with double her salary and teams that didn't host podcasts. She didn't smile. Just walked, not with revenge, but with relief. Somewhere behind her, alarms kept ringing. Phones kept buzzing. Troy was still silent. Brandon was still scrambling. But Jessica was done. And finally, the silence was hers. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.